In this video, you're going to discover once and for all if it's better to rent or buy a house. And make sure you stay to the end of the video because I'm going to reveal a rent or buy formula that I have never shared with anyone else. It's going to save you a ton of money. Let's dive right in. Before I show you whether it's smarter to rent or buy a house, let me actually show you what not to do. Right here, we've got the cost of rent per month. That's $1,500. Our mortgage payment in this case is $1,500. And what people typically do and what you see with these online gurus is they just set up a pro and con here. Your pros for ownership is equity, appreciation. Your cons, ownership costs, opportunity costs, interest. Over here, you've got the pros of flexibility, no equity, blah, 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 blah. This is what you do not want to do. So how many of you are at home watching this video saying to yourself, what? George, that's exactly what every single financial guru that I have ever heard, that's exactly what they say to do. And I realize that, but it's completely wrong. And remember, on this video, you're going to hear some things you have never heard before. So what should you do? It's a completely different analysis that starts with something that I like to call an RV ratio arbitrage. Step number one, we've got to analyze the RV ratios. Now, what on earth is an RV ratio? It's the monthly rent that you can collect from a property divided by your cost basis, or how much money you have out of pocket for that property. Let's use the example of California, a state with notoriously bad RV ratios. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that you can get a 0.5 RV ratio in California. Very, very bad. So a $300,000 house in California, you could expect to get $1,500 a month in rent. Contrast that to a state where I love to invest, that's Missouri. There you can get about a 1% RV ratio, that's good. For this same $300,000, you could buy 2 rental properties in Missouri, $150,000 each, and collect $3,000 a month combined. So what I suggest for that California resident is to rent where they live in California and buy in a place like Missouri. What you'll see is that person in California will save hundreds of thousands of dollars by renting their residence in California, taking that down payment, and instead of buying in California, purchasing rental properties in Missouri. And if the alarm bells are going off about property management, don't worry about it. I've owned rental properties since 2012, and I've never lived in the areas where I own properties. But that's not the only factor that goes into the formula. You can't make your decisions based strictly on RV ratios. And remember, I'm going to share my entire formula with you really soon. But before I do, let's go ahead and go through the math and see why this California resident would save so much money renting where they live and owning what they rent. So if you're purchasing a home in California for $300,000, you'll have about a $60,000 down payment. That's 20%. Over the span of 30 years, all your mortgage payments monthly will total roughly $402,000. If you add that to your original down payment of $60,000, you've got $462,000 all in. Doing the same math with the 2 Missouri properties that equal $300,000, same down payment, $60,000. Here you have 0 payments per month because your renters are making your mortgage payments for you. We add that to the $60,000 that you have out of pocket for the down payment. In total, after 30 years, out of pocket, you're $60,000 compared to $462,000. The original purchase price was $300,000, but real estate really just stays consistent with inflation. So if we have $300,000 of purchasing power here at year 1, we're most likely going to have the same $300,000 of purchasing power at the end of year 30 when we own the property. Whoa, 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 George. California real estate always appreciates. False. This is a complete myth perpetuated by people who are trying to get you to buy California real estate. Like the California Board of Realtors, who look at nominal prices and incomplete charts intentionally to mislead you. Let me give you an example. The home prices in Venezuela are probably appreciating by over 10,000% per year. But we don't want to buy a home there because we know this is strictly a result of inflation. But for some reason, when it's that same inflation that makes home prices go up in California, we think it's totally different. The fact of the matter is, when you adjust for inflation and the size of the home, prices in California have gone up, they have gone down, but they tend to mean revert to the same inflation-adjusted prices as 1970. If we've got 462 all in and $300,000 worth of purchasing power at the end, you can see we have a loss. Looking at this, we only have $60,000 total out of pocket. If we have that same $300,000 of purchasing power, you can see we have a net gain of $240,000 worth of purchasing power. And I know this gets a little confusing, but you really need to think in terms of purchasing power and not nominal dollars. You could say, George, we've got the rent. Remember the rent? That's right. We'd have to pay that $1,500 a month to actually rent the place where we were living. Over the span of 30 years, that would equal $540,000. But we'd also have positive cash flow coming in from our rental properties of roughly $800 a month. Over the span of 30 years, we'd have $288,000. So if we subtract our positive cash flow from the amount that we would have to pay in rent to rent this house in California, we would be left with a negative $252,000. If we subtract that from the $240,000 gain in purchasing power, we'd be left with $12,000, a negative $12,000. But remember, we've got a negative $162,000 up here. And I haven't even included the property taxes or the insurance that your renters are paying in Missouri. If I add that, that's an additional negative $144,000 for a total of almost $300,000. The question then becomes, what is better? Which would you prefer? Minus $12,000 or minus $300,000? Okay, guys, this is it. The moment you've all been waiting for. I'm going to reveal the formula that will help you make much smarter decisions on whether it's better to rent or buy in your area. Let's go ahead and use the examples that we had before of Kansas City and Los Angeles. Using this formula, Kansas City scored a 9, 5, 3, and an 8 for a total of 25. Los Angeles scored a 1, 2, 0, and a 6 for a total of 9. The lower the score is, the better it is for you to rent. The higher the score is, the better it is for you to buy. But now I'm not saying that you should just go out and buy a house. There's a trick to it, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But let me go ahead and show you the formula right now. You've got to take your RV ratio plus the population change plus historical prices adjusted for inflation, plus can you buy for under the cost of construction? If so, by how much? And you rate each one of these on a scale of 1 to 10, and then you just simply add them together. So let's just walk through Denver quickly. We've got an RV ratio. That's not going to be very good. So we're going to give that probably a 3. Population change. Denver is the fastest growing city in the entire United States. So they're going to get a 10 there. The historical and prices in Denver are extremely high. So they're going to get a 0. Cost of construction. I highly doubt you can buy under the cost of construction in Denver unless you really get lucky. So on that one, they're only going to get a 3. So Denver's combined score is going to be about a 16. Remember, Kansas City was a 25. And that's a big difference. So if you live in Denver, you know that you should be renting your house and taking that down payment that you would have used to buy in Denver, and instead of buying there, buying rental properties in Kansas City with the same down payment. It would be pretty much the same for Seattle. But now what about Detroit? I'll throw you guys a curveball there. What do you think someone should do in Detroit? Because the RV ratios in Detroit would be astronomical. You can probably get 2% RV ratios in Detroit. But Detroit doesn't score very well because the population change is terrible. They've been losing people for the last decade. Their prices are good, way under construction, but because this number is so low, it cannot even come close to Kansas City. So even if you live in Detroit and the RV ratios are great, the houses are cheap, it's still better to rent and take that same money and buy in Kansas City. And if you live in Kansas City, or if you live in a market that gets a great score, should you go out there and buy a house as a residence? No, you shouldn't. What you should do is house hack. I want you to check this out right here. It'll show you how to become a millionaire through house hacking. And if you have more questions on inflation, I have a video right here that actually shows you how to profit from inflation. Check this out, and I'll see you guys on the next video.